If you enjoy this story, please remember to like and subscribe. The dead deer hit the pavement with the wet sound of raw meat slapping concrete. I'm not talking about a roadkill collision. I've had plenty of those living in Washington. This deer fell from the sky like God himself had dropped it. 4 gaping claw marks raked across its flank, blood still steaming in my headlights. And then, before my brain could even process what I was seeing, 8 feet of muscle and leathery wings descended from the darkness above. The thing that followed that carcass down wasn't in any field guide, wasn't supposed to exist outside of nightmares and ancient folklore. But there it was, massive talons digging into dead flesh, yellow eyes boring into mine through the windshield with an intelligence that made my blood turn to ice water. Kelly, the stranded girl I'd picked up 20 minutes earlier, grabbed my arm so hard I still had bruises a week later. "What is that?" she whispered, but I couldn't answer. My throat had locked up the moment those wings spread wide enough to blot out the stars. Let me back up, because what happened on that empty stretch of road outside Cougar, Washington, in July 1984, changed everything I thought I knew about what hunts in the dark. And if you're driving alone at night through the deep woods, you need to know what's up there, waiting. You need to know what's watching. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how it really started. It began as the most ordinary kind of evening, the kind that lulls you into thinking the world makes sense. I was heading to Yale Lake for my annual fishing trip, my one weekend a year to escape the chaos of family life and find some peace on the water. The wife, 2 kids, our dog, they all needed pieces of me I didn't have to give anymore. Some men drink to sort through their problems. I fish. The sun had already disappeared behind the towering pines when I finally left the office. Work complications had kept me until nearly 7, and I was running later than planned. With each passing mile, the daylight bled away, until finally I flipped on my headlights and surrendered to the night. The road stretched empty before me, exactly the way I liked it. No traffic, no civilization, just me and the darkness and the promise of solitude ahead. Perfect. That's when I saw her, a young woman with long brown hair standing beside a broken-down orange Pinto, thumb extended in the universal sign of distress. Part of me wanted to keep driving, to preserve my precious alone time. But another part, the part that wondered what I'd want someone to do if it were my wife stranded out here in the growing darkness, made me ease onto the shoulder. She ran to my passenger door, illuminated by my brake lights. Flowered shirt, old jeans, a large purse slung over her shoulder. Relief flooded her face as I rolled down the window. "Thank you so much," she called out. "Car trouble or need a ride?" I asked. "A ride," she said, sliding into the cab. "Unless you happen to have a couple gallons of gas in the back." "Fresh out," I replied with a smile. "Where are you headed?" "About 20 miles north to Cougar." "Perfect. That's exactly where I'm going." I pulled back onto the empty road, the darkness swallowing us whole. "You're lucky I came along. This isn't exactly a high-traffic area." "Tell me about it," she said, settling into the seat. "You're the only car I've seen in 20 minutes. I would have been in serious trouble if you hadn't stopped. I'm Kelly, by the way." "Mike," I said, extending my hand. "And yeah, that's why I take this road, to avoid people. Wouldn't want to be walking it alone after dark either." We settled into comfortable silence, just the steady hum of my Ford's engine and the whisper of tires on asphalt. For the first time all day, I felt myself starting to relax. The stress of work, of family obligations, of being needed by everyone. It all began to fade into the darkness behind us. That peace lasted exactly 10 minutes. "Do you hear that?" Kelly asked suddenly, her voice tight with concern. I cracked my window. At first, just the normal sounds of night, wind through trees, the distant call of an owl. Then I heard it, a flapping sound. Not like birds, like enormous sheets being whipped by a hurricane wind. The noise grew louder, drowning out my engine. The truck began to shake as if we'd driven into a storm, though the trees outside barely swayed. Kelly grabbed the ceiling handle to keep from sliding across the seat. "What's happening?" she shouted over the noise. "I don't know," I shouted back, fighting to keep the truck steady. Then, without warning, the engine died. Just stopped. The headlights stayed on, but when I turned the key, nothing happened. Not even a click. The flapping sound reached a crescendo that seemed to come from directly above us, then cut off abruptly. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. That's when the deer fell. It hit the pavement 20 feet ahead of us with the wet sound of raw meat slapping concrete. 4 deep gashes marked its side, too clean and too deliberate to be from any predator I knew. Blood pooled black in my headlights. Before either of us could speak, something massive descended from the sky. The creature landed on the carcass with predatory grace, driving enormous claws deep into the dead animal. My hands went white knuckle on the steering wheel. Kelly went rigid beside me, her breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. The thing settled over its kill, and that's when we saw them. Massive, leathery wings folding against its back. It had to be 8 feet tall, covered in blue-tinted fur that rippled over shifting muscle. Dark claws protruded from all 4 limbs. Its head was wolf-like, complete with the teeth to match. But those eyes, those enormous yellow eyes that stared directly at us through the glare of my headlights, belonged to something else entirely. Something ancient. Something that thought. It tilted its head, studying us with obvious intelligence. Then it opened its maw and drew in a deep breath that seemed to pull the very air from our lungs. "We need to get out of here," Kelly whispered, her voice barely audible. "The truck's dead," I hissed back, my hand frantically working the ignition. "Look!" But the engine remained silent, and those yellow eyes never left us. The creature spread its wings again, 20 feet tip to tip, blotting out the stars. It seemed to be testing whether it could lift both the deer and maintain its grip. The weight and awkward hold had obviously forced this landing, this terrifying encounter with witnesses it hadn't planned for. "Should we run?" Kelly whispered, as if the beast might understand our words over its own thunderous wing beats. "Where?" I managed to reply, my mind racing through impossible scenarios. The nearest cover was hundreds of yards away through dense forest. We'd never make it. The creature found its grip. It hoisted the deer off the ground, first dragging the carcass, then lifting it skyward. One of the animal's hooves struck my hood with a metallic bang. Another scraped across the roof with the sound of fingernails on a chalkboard, leaving behind what I knew would be gouges in the metal. The wing beats intensified, shaking my Ford like a toy in the hands of an angry child. The deafening whoosh gradually diminished as the creature rose higher, drifting away into the darkness with its prize. I tried the key again with trembling hands. The engine roared to life. I didn't hesitate. I slammed the gear shift into drive and floored the accelerator. The truck shot forward like a bullet, tires screaming against asphalt. Kelly pounded the dashboard with an open palm. "Faster!" she shouted, though I was already pushing the Ford well beyond any sane speed for a winding mountain road. Raw, primal fear, the kind our ancestors knew when they huddled around fires to keep the darkness at bay, coursed through my veins. Every shadow between the trees could hide those wings. Every sound could be the whisper of death descending from above. "What the hell was that thing?" I asked, my foot heavy on the gas. God, I don't know," Kelly stammered. "But I heard something. A few years back, some guy from Cougar claimed he saw something like that. I thought it was just drunk talk, but..." She trailed off, staring out at the darkness rushing past our windows. After what felt like a safe distance, I forced myself to ease off the accelerator. We finished the remaining miles to town in stunned silence, both of us straining to listen for the sound of wings. If we heard them again, we both knew I'd floor it without hesitation. When we finally reached Cougar's scattered lights, the relief was overwhelming. Kelly directed me to her mother's house with a shaky voice, and I pulled into the driveway like a ship reaching harbor after a storm. For several moments, we just sat there, staring at the dashboard, trying to process what we'd witnessed. "I can definitely say it was nice meeting you," I finally managed, my voice still unsteady. "I don't know what I would have done alone out there. What would have happened to me if you hadn't picked me up?" she countered, visibly shaking. "Walking alone in the dark, no cars, and me being about the size of that deer. You saved my life, Mike. Maybe we saved each other." She leaned across the seat and gave me a tight, lingering hug. "Thank you more than I know how to say." "You're welcome," I replied, returning the embrace. "I'm glad I was there. See? Good thing I'm not completely antisocial after all." The nervous laugh that followed didn't quite mask the fear still crawling under my skin. Kelly grabbed her purse and jumped out. The porch light cast long shadows across her face as she turned to wave goodbye. I waited until she was safely inside before backing out of the driveway. I considered abandoning my weekend plans. My nerves were shot to hell. But the thought of driving back through that darkness seemed worse than continuing to the cabin. Better to be safely inside four walls than out on the road where the winged hunter prowled. I found a fast food drive-thru and ordered a burger meal I couldn't taste. My thoughts remained fixated on what we'd seen. The creature had acted with intelligence, as if it recognized what we were. My headlights hadn't frightened it. And what kind of animal could cause an engine to simply die like that? At the cabin, I went to bed early, but sleep came in fragments. My dreams were filled with pursuit, running from some unseen terror, never quite fast enough, unable to find shelter. When I awoke before dawn, my stomach remained knotted with anxiety. But I had come to fish. The normalcy of my annual ritual seemed like the only way to process what had happened. I stepped outside into the cool morning air, trying to shake off the residual fear. Then I saw my truck in the daylight. My stomach dropped. Deep dents marked the hood where the deer's hooves had struck. Dark crimson streaks trailed across the roof, dried blood that caught the morning sun like rust. The gouges in the metal were real, deep, deliberate. In that moment, any lingering hope that it had all been some shared hallucination died. Something was out there among the trees. Something that hunted by night. Something that would forever change how I saw the darkness between the pines. I spent that weekend fishing, but I never stayed out after sunset. And I've never driven that road alone again. Some people ask me if I reported it. To who? The police? What would I say? That a werewolf with wings dropped a deer on my truck. They'd have locked me up for observation. But Kelly knows. And sometimes, late at night when the wind picks up and I hear something that might be wings outside my window, I remember those yellow eyes staring at us through the headlights. Eyes that held intelligence. Eyes that remembered faces. Eyes that might still be watching. If you're ever driving alone through the deep woods after dark and you hear that sound, like enormous sheets snapping in a hurricane wind, don't stop to investigate. Don't try to rationalize it away. Just drive. Drive fast and don't look up. Because some things are better left unseen in the darkness where they belong.